My name is Justin, and I am an addict, and I have been actively working the steps in the rooms of recovery since September of 2013, and am grateful to be sober, one day at a time, thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts. RECO12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds, and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. Speakers from our past meetings have represented many fellowships and identify with addictions with such variety as alcoholism, drugs, food, sex, gambling, theft, just to name a few. Each Friday at noon Central Time, we hold a live lunch hour speaker meeting with a recovering addict from anywhere on earth, pertaining to any or no faith tradition, and with any background who shares their experience, strength, and hope on a specified recovery topic of their choice. For the 12-week period that we started on March 4th through May 20th of 2022, we will be focusing on each of the 12 steps of recovery. Our speaker today will share for 20 to 25 minutes on his experience with step 3, and then the live audience gets the opportunity to ask questions of him for another 20 to 25 minutes. Now, to get weekly invitations to join us, please go to www.reco12.com. That's RECO12.com/join us, and submit your email address there to get the reminders and links. Donations and podcast ratings and reviews are greatly appreciated, and details on doing that will be in the chat of the live meeting and also in the show notes of the podcast. If you are listening and also feel that RECO12 is of value, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It's a great way to help get the message out to more addicts who suffer and are seeking tools for recovery. Now, we look forward each week to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. A quick disclaimer about this 12-week series. While we hope that these episodes will be helpful to both sponsors and sponsees alike, the next 12 weeks, these 12 weeks of episodes are not intended to replace the necessity of working with a sponsor through the steps. We will not be working the steps in these meetings. They are meant only to be a supplement and informative reference on what the steps mean and why they are important to the individual speaking about them. Now, step 3 reads, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And Harvey's going to speak about that. Let me give you a little background information on Harvey here. Harvey E, who, by the way, is one of my favorite people in the world and my sponsor, is the 67-year-old Orthodox Jew who, together with his wife, Sharon, have married 5 children and have 5 married children and 19 grandchildren. He joined SA in January 7th of 2014 on the recommendation of his new therapist. At the time, his marriage of 36 years was in serious trouble. He had recently been arrested for acting out behaviors going back 40 years, and he was suffering unbearable shame, shunned by his community and many of his family members. This week, he celebrates 3,000 consecutive days of sobriety, as well as years in recovery from sex addiction. Harvey has embraced a mission of sharing his experience, strength, and hope with others, and has spoken around the world, both in person and on the phone and Zoom platforms. Today, he is excited to share on step 3. Take it away, Harvey. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Justin. And I am grateful for your friendship and for your inviting me to speak this morning. Anyway, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Harvey E., and I live in Toronto, Canada, and I am a grateful recovering sexaholic, a good person worthy of recovery, and a child of God. And in case you don't know, 3,000 days basically is 8 years and about 3 months. So I am grateful for all of that. And I like to begin my shares with a set-aside prayer. So here goes. Dear God, please set aside anything we think we know about ourselves, about our disease, about the big book, 12 steps, the program, the fellowship, the people in the fellowship, and all spiritual terms, especially you, God, so that we may have an open mind and a new experience with all of these things. Please help us to see the truth. Amen. As I read this prayer, I come to the realization that in these words, in the words of this prayer, lies some very fundamental ideas that I would like to share with you today. When I came into the SA rooms back in January of 2014, I had no idea that I would have to do exactly what this prayer calls me to do. That fateful day, I took my seat together with other men who shared my addictive process of lust and sexual acting out. And I admitted to myself and them that I was powerless over that behavior, over that need to turn to lust, and that my life had indeed become unmanageable. Doing that involved setting aside all the lies that I had been telling myself and anyone who'd listen about how great life was, how fulfilled I was in my chosen profession, my family, my religious life, etc. I had put on a good face for well over 50 years by then. I was really good at it too. I was a consummate liar. I had even come to believe my own lies. And I had walking and talking holograms of Harvey that magically appeared as needed, appropriate to every occasion and every interaction. Harvey the father, Harvey the husband, Harvey the musician, Harvey the dentist, Harvey the philanthropist, and so it went. I dreaded the moments when different parts of my life intersected and I got caught trying to be two versions of Harvey at the same time. Of course, as holograms, they were but ghosts, phantoms, and people quickly realized there was no hope of a real relationship with them. And as Johann Hari says, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And that tells me that addiction is really all about misconnection. So I admitted for myself, I got honest with myself, finally. And I didn't get honest for my wife's sake, for my religious leaders, or for a judge in a court of law. I had to find that truth deep inside me where it lay. That admission had to be my personal testimony, not something I made up to please anyone. Let me say that I believe that the words of the 12 steps of the AA are inspired, and therefore the words we find in any step we are examining are not accidental or arbitrary. So there's a discussion of powerlessness and unmanageability that belongs here as I just reviewed step 1. Obviously, willpower hadn't worked for me. Nothing really had for very long. And my life could be described by the following words. Everybody listen. Lonely, hopeless, desperate, empty, chaotic, full of anxiety, negativity, selfish, immoral, loveless, and painful. Anybody here relate to any of those words? So, having set aside that lie about how great things were, I had to move on to step 2, back to the prayer. Set aside all spiritual terms, especially you, God. Can you imagine throwing all your beliefs around God into a green garbage bag and taking it out to the street to be picked up by the truck on garbage day? In my case, I wrote that God of my old understanding a letter, firing him once and for all. And then I set about hiring a new God, one that actually would be the God I needed. Now, you might have seen me rummaging through the city dump occasionally, searching madly for that old familiar God, like the worn slippers I keep by the front door of my house. Thankfully, that's not happening much anymore. And it's only one of the many things I'm very grateful for today. So again, to summarize quickly what the second step gave me, a new God of my understanding. Here we go. An all-powerful, all-knowing, and most importantly, always present God. Heavenly Father, are you really there? It's a children's song, but I listen to that all the time. Anyway, always present God of infinite unconditional love and compassion. Eternal patience. The president of the Harvey fan club. The Mickey Goldmill to my best impersonation of Rocky Balboa. For those who don't know, Mickey Goldmill was his manager. The Heavenly Father with a soft lap to jump into, a strong chest that I can rest my head on, my ear hearing the beating of his heart. And above all else, I found a God that I could trust to show up, to be there, to be all of those things. Trust. What a novel idea. May we find him now. Now, this will be critical to all the other steps. A God of our new understanding. And so we come to the third step, and it reads, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. Again, it's all in the words, the inspired text of the big book. So decision is the first important word in this step. The word decide is a compound word made of two parts, de and side. The etymology of this word is important. Where do you find that second part of the word, side? Where do we see that word, that part, side, in all the words we have in our language? So I won't make you guess. Suicide, homicide, fratricide, herbicide, pesticide, genocide, to name a few. They all refer to killing someone or something. Side means to kill, whether it's ourselves, another man, many men, our brother, weeds, pests. It's all about killing. So what about the first half of the word? De, D-E. Those of you who are familiar with Spanish or Italian might recognize that de means from, can mean from. So together, the word decide means to kill from. So I have a few options. Whenever I have to come to some decision, I have choices, and I need to figure out which one to do. So I decide by killing from that list of choices, from that group, all the other choices that aren't the right ones, or at least the ones that I think are right, the ones that I should do. I leave behind that one that I should do, or perhaps two, whatever the amount of choices I'm entitled to. I kill off all the other choices. So if I get to a crossroad, a fork in the road, and there's a right and there's a left, if I decide to go right, it's because I killed off the choice of going left. That's a decision. It's an action, not just a thought. An intention is a thought. A belief is a thought. An admission is a thought. The first two steps are thoughts. They're in our heads. The third step has to be about finally putting what we already know into action. So there's a cute joke, which I share, that I don't believe demonstrates how to work the third step, but I'll tell you the joke. Here it goes. Question. 3 bullfrogs are sitting on a log on a pond, and one bullfrog makes a decision to jump into the pond. So how many are left? And the answer is 3. The bullfrog only made a decision. He hasn't done anything yet. So in the decision that I've described, I think we need to see the bullfrog as having killed off the idea of continuing to sit on that log. So at that point, he can't stay on it. He has to jump. So this joke doesn't really work for us in the third step. We really have to know we got to jump. And that's true. That's true for us. So what's next? Here's the next set of words in the step. Turn over. Where do we see the expression of turning over in language, in our regular speech? So again, I won't make you guess. Turn over a new leaf. Everybody's heard of that. Turn over the keys to the rent-a-car, or to the policeman when he tests your sobriety with a breathalyzer and you fail. Turn over the keys to the house when you close the sale after the certified check is in your hand. It also means to surrender. There's a word we all dreaded. Biblically, we know that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, if people are familiar with the book of Genesis, and we know that Sodom and Gomorrah were turned over for the sinful behavior of their citizens. So we can see how turning over a new leaf is going to require that opening prayer again. Set aside what I think I know about myself And I split the word myself. It's my self that I need to know about or think I know about. I need to set aside what I think myself needs, what myself demands, in fact. I need to set aside the willpower I believe myself has. I need to self-forget in some ways. I need to come to terms with the compelling truth that I can't do this myself. And that self is there in the words of the third step. Our will and our lives, our thoughts and our action. Isn't that myself? First, I need a clear understanding of my will and my life. We determine that by examining what's important to us, what we can give up and what we can never give up. And isn't that always control? Damn, that word control. And that need for control will bring out those defects of character we're going to study and do an inventory about when we get to step 4. Selfishness, self-seeking, dishonesty, and fear. So the big book tells me how I need to turn over myself. I need to stop running the show. Stop trying to control the outcome. Stop trying to change others to suit my needs. In fact, I have to stop playing God. So we become convinced, as the big book says, that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Sounds pretty easy, right? No, it isn't. Turning over my will and my life is about surrender. And in starting the steps, we were told we need to surrender lust. Surrender that overriding insistence that we need it, like we need oxygen to breathe. I'll die if I don't get my drug. How will I manage my life? It's so painful. It's so scary. It's so overwhelming. It's so stressful. It's distress. It's really distress. And I'm intolerant of distress. So I turn to my drug. That's why I'm here. So with the help of the fellowship, our sponsor, at the beginning, we often get a little reprieve. And we're grateful for that. Now we realize in step 3 that we need to surrender something much more dear to us, the control that we just mentioned. So back to the wording of step 3, to the care of God. Here's where the work we did in step 2 really becomes foundational. I cannot and will not surrender my will and my life to a God that I don't trust. I can't. If I don't really trust him, I'll never surrender my life to him. That's why I needed to do the work of step 2, to find that new understanding. So just as we surrender the keys to the policeman when we see his uniform and we know that he's real, or to the new homeowners when we sell our house and we've got the certified check in our hands, we find the trust in that God of our new understanding to surrender our will and our lives to him. And how do we describe the care of God? I believe each of us finds a different aspect of care that resonates with us. And it often can be found and expressed in how we would want to be parented. Again, the big book reminds us that he is the Father, we are his children. So as we think of the image of that Father, we find that he is there for us. He comforts us. He kisses my boo-boo. He understands our pain, our fears. He is concerned about how we are doing in our jobs, with our spouses, with our children. He wants to know how we're doing in what I call the sandbox of life. He listens. He really listens. The 12 and 12 describes him as a safe harbor. So it's that new trust that allows me to let him direct my life if I practice the willingness to do that, and at the same time give up my self-reliance and the lie of self-sufficiency and begin to build that new relationship to him that begins with turning over my life to him. So how does my life change when I take such a position? Here's a few questions that I often suggest we should ask ourselves. If you knew that all was well and on schedule in your life today, how would you feel? If you knew that things were being managed by a power greater than yourself in a way that would work out to your best interests, how would you act differently? If you knew you had no power to control events, outcomes, or a particular person, how would you behave differently? What would you say or do? What would you stop saying or doing? What would you do differently for yourself in order to enjoy your own life now, to live in the present moment? So we are promised certain things when we sincerely take such a position that life is none of our business. Number one, God will direct our life and give you what you need. Two, you will become less selfish and genuinely care for others. Three, you'll be interested in making a positive contribution to life. Four, you will feel power flow in. And this, of course, is one of those interesting paradoxes of the program. I was powerless. I surrender my life to my higher power, and I feel new power coming in. That's kind of weird, isn't it? So, but that's true. Surrendering to a power greater than ourselves is how we become empowered. Empowered in a new, effective way than we believed possible. Doors open, windows open, possibilities occur. Our energies become channeled in new, fruitful ways. We become in tune with the plan for our life and our place in the universe. Here's some more promises. 6, you will enjoy peace of mind. 7, you will face life successfully. 8, you will begin to spiritually awaken. 9, you'll begin to lose your fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter, as it says in the big book. And you'll be reborn. You'll become a different person. And the way we implement this decision is to complete steps 4 through 9. Those steps are necessary to help build a lasting relationship with our higher power, to clean the vessel, as I describe it, so that we have a vessel that our relationship can grow in, that he can indwell in. In AA Comes of Age, it's a very good book, there's a short reflection on paradoxes that I thought I'd share with you since we talked about the paradox of power. What glorious mysteries paradoxes are. They do not compute, yet when recognized and accepted, they reaffirm something in the universe beyond human logic. When I face a fear, I am given courage. When I support my brother or sister, my capacity to love myself is increased. When I accept pain as part of the growing experience of life, I realize a greater happiness. When I look at my dark side, I am brought into a new light. When I accept my vulnerabilities and surrender to a higher power, I am graced with unforeseen strength. I stumbled through the doors of SA in disgrace, expecting nothing from life, and I have been given hope and dignity. Miraculously, the only way to keep the gifts of the program is to pass them on. And here's a little suggestion on how to test how much we are truly surrendered to God's will for us today. I ask myself, how invested am I in the outcome of my day or of any task that I'm in the middle of doing? If I have planned everything out to the last detail, then I can be pretty sure I'm in self-will. But if I instead take the necessary actions and then suit up and show up to be of service, then I remain open to God's will. And I always find that what God has in store for me is better than what I could have wanted for myself. So today, I will surrender to the laying of the foundation, the groundwork in my life. If it is time to enjoy the placement of the finishing touches, I will surrender to that and enjoy that too. I will remember to be grateful for a higher power that is a master builder and only has my best interests in mind, creating and constructing my life. I will be grateful for my higher power's care and attention to details in laying that foundation. Even though I become impatient at times, I will stand in awe at the beauty of God's finished product. So I close this share. As I do, I want to express again the gratitude I feel for my rebirth, my new and ever-growing relation to my Father in heaven. It is said that those who leave everything in God's hands will eventually see God's hand in everything. And another great saying, when you are in fear, you should remember to TRUST. Try really using step 3. Because the peace and serenity I get from turning my will and life over to God are just a decision away. And throughout my recovery, I have found that it is easy to slide back into old behaviors, and that whenever I do, I start to experience my old feelings again. That isn't a good thing. Whenever I find myself on my pity pot, wondering, where's mine? My sponsor brings me back to the solution. He simply says, what step are you on, Harvey? What step are you on? And when I ask myself, which step applies to the current situation I'm obsessing over, I see the way out. So in closing, I'd like to share a beautiful poem by John Paul Moore that really speaks to me, and I hope it speaks to you as well. And it's titled, My Cup Has Overflowed. I've never made a fortune, and it's probably too late now, but don't worry about that much. I'm happy anyhow. And as I go along life's way, I'm reaping better than I sowed. I'm drinking from my saucer because my cup has overflowed. Haven't got a lot of riches, and sometimes the going's tough, but I've got loving ones all around me, and that makes me rich enough. I thank God for his blessings and the mercies he's bestowed. I'm drinking from my saucer because my cup has overflowed. I remember times when things went wrong. My faith wore somewhat thin, but all at once the dark clouds broke and the sun peeped through again. So Lord, help me not to gripe about the tough rows I have hoed. I'm drinking from my saucer because my cup has overflowed. And if God gives me strength and courage when the way grows steep and rough, I'll not ask for other blessings. I'm already blessed enough. And may I never be too busy to help others bear their loads. Then I'll keep drinking from my saucer because my cup has overflowed. I'm Harvey E. in Toronto, a grateful recovering sexaholic, and I pass.
Thank you so much, Harvey. Man, that poem just hit me. I will definitely be finding that and putting a link to that in the show notes of this so people can track that down really quickly. Very powerful. Thank you, Harvey. Before we get to the Q&A, I just want to remind our live audience that in order to ask a question of Harvey, please type it in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll get to those. I've also written down several things here that I'll be following up on, but we're going to start off with a question from one of our live audience members. This is Daniel B. Daniel says, Harvey, thank you for sharing today and for all the work you do to make the world a better place. My question is this: in your experience, do you find it necessary to renew or reaffirm the step 3 decision? Or has the power and efficacy of that original decision seen you through each of your 3,000 days of recovery?
Stress and trauma happen inside of the body, which means we can heal them through the body. My name is Luis Mojica. I'm a somatic therapist, nutritionist, and host of the Holistic Life Navigation podcast. Join me each week as I teach you how to release stress and trauma through listening to your body, using nutrition, somatic experiencing, and other holistic practices. You can listen at the Holistic Life Navigation podcast or at holisticlifenavigation.com.
Yeah. So first of all, 3,000 comes in a few days. I'm not there yet. I don't want to give myself a malocchio, as we would say in Italian. We're not going there. One day at a time. I would say the opposite is absolutely true. Step 3 and all the steps, I think, become part of everyday life. It's part of what I have to do every day of my life. I do DSRs with people pretty much every day. For those who don't know what a DSR, it's a daily sobriety renewal. And in that renewal, I remind myself and again admit that I am powerless over this disease. I am powerless over that choice of lust if I let myself go to that place. That I have a God that would and could and wants to restore me to sanity. And I know I am insane when I live in that other world. And then I remind myself that I make a decision every day to live in sobriety, to turn over my will to Him. And it's a daily reminder. And I'm reminded of for those who knows the word medrash, it's a piece of oral tradition from our Bible. There's a discussion in that medrash about which of the verses in the Bible, in the Old Testament, of course, is the core belief, is the core message that we have to live with. And there's actually an argument between 3 great rabbis. It's a debate. And the first one, Ben Zoma, says, it's the Shema Yisrael. For those who've heard of it, it's called Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God the Lord is one. And that's the foundation of monotheism that we believe. And many of us Jews have gone have been martyred, saying these words, speaking these words as they were martyred. Ben Nanas, the second rabbi, says it's love thy neighbor as thyself. And we do believe that's a very important message. But he says it's the most important. He says that underlies all interpersonal relationships, and without which there can be no society, no community. And then Ben Pazi comes along, funny name, and he says there's an even more fundamental verse. And interestingly, it's actually mentioned twice in the Old Testament, once in Exodus and again in Numbers. And here's the line. It sounds kind of quaint. It says, the one lamb you should bring as a sacrifice in the morning, and the one lamb you should offer in the afternoon. Sounds kind of interesting. Why is that? And he says, this is the verse that commands us to bring a daily sacrifice once in the morning and once at the end of the day. That constant sacrifice brought onto the altar and burned in its entirety. So on the surface, this verse doesn't seem to be terribly inspiring or monumental, does it? So what was Ben Pazi's talking about? What is he saying here? And I think he's talking about our program. The essence of divine service, of living in God's will instead of our own, is consistency. It's discipline. Day in, day out. Day in, day out. Every single day without exception. Scorching heat, pelting rain, sleet, snow, hail, no matter what. Here I am. I'm here, no vacation. I think that's what our program requires. Discipline, daily renewal to those principles. So I'm going to pass.
Love that, Harvey. I want to dig there for just a second. Bringing a sacrifice in the morning, bringing a sacrifice in the evening. What does in today's world, what would a sacrifice be? Because we don't take a lamb to the altar every day, but what is that figurative lamb that that you could use as an example in your own life that you take to the altar every morning and every evening as a sacrifice?
So again, in our faith tradition, and I think it's common to believe this, that an animal sacrifice is what God has given us an option instead of having to sacrifice ourselves. And when we bring an animal as a sacrifice, it's really about us. So I believe that bringing a sacrifice morning and night is about bringing ourselves, and in a certain way, sacrificing ourselves on the altar of life and saying, I'm ready to surrender me in that way. So I think that's really what that is.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Harvey. All right. Next question from our live audience. This is from Zach A. Zach says, Dear Harvey, thank you so much for your share. I am working on praying for strength to bear the burdens I have rather than asking for them to be magically removed. What experience can you offer on dealing with the burdens that don't go away immediately? And I was going to ask a question similar to that too. So let's go with that. Thanks, Zach.
Okay. Thank you, Zach. Great to see you here. So I would say that the word burden is somewhere I would start with right off the bat. I would pray on that word. Why am I burdened? I remember my sponsor. I called him in a frenzy, and I said, I'm struggling. I can't stay sober. I'm struggling. And he said, stop struggling. And he hung up the phone. And I called him back and said, you hung up on me. I said, I'm struggling. And you hung up on me. He says, yeah, stop struggling. And he hung up the phone again. And I called him a third time. And Cameron says, why are you bothering me? He says, I told you what to do. He said, stop struggling. And I think that part of the word burden is what we make of life. I think that's something that's really happening in our heads. It's how we see things. It's the same way we believe that. When we talk about the third step, prayer, the burdens, the burden of my that I have to ask for God to take away is the burden of addiction, but it doesn't have to be a burden. It's what I make of it. I think the example of the insulin dependent diabetic is a good example. We are similar to insulin dependent diabetics. We can live a perfectly healthy life as long as we live by the steps. It's like taking our insulin every day. And just as some of those insulin diabetics live depressed and unhappy lives, thinking, God, what a burden this is. I got to take that effing pill, that effing needle every day, and I have to watch how much sugar I take. And you can turn it into a burden. You can make life a burden. But there are plenty of people out here who are insulin-dependent diabetics who live a happy and joyous life with the understanding that, hey, all I need to do is take this shot to check the amount of sugar that I'm about to eat and take the appropriate amount of insulin on this little, meter that I have attached to my, my waist, and everything goes great. So I think the word burden is a lot. I think has a lot to do with our state of mind, and I think it comes back to if I feel that it's a burden, isn't that about fear? Isn't that ultimately about fear? So if I'm living in fear and it's a burden, then I'm probably living back in that place of self-will and self-sufficiency, self-reliance. I feel it's a burden because it's on me. I feel like I've got to do this. It's on me. There's nobody else who's going to help me. And if I don't do this, I'm done. And I think that doing a good step 3 and living in step 3 can be really, really helpful in that, because we no longer have to do this alone. We just have to show up and live purposefully and live a life of purpose. Living a life of purpose rather than a life of performance, I think is huge. We grew up, most of us, I'll speak for myself. I grew up in a performance-driven life, in a performance-driven society. Everything was about how well you performed, how great you played piano. Hey, I know Zach plays piano. And how well you follow the gospel, how well how obedient you were. Everything was about performance. And that's a burden, man. That's a huge burden. Wouldn't it be so much nicer if I could just have to say, I wake up every morning and I know that the only thing I have to do is the next right thing. Just be purposeful, try to do that, and leave the results to him. Life is none of my business. I pass.
A higher consumption of vegetables may cut your odds of developing depression by as much as 62%. An American Cancer Society study found that women who sit for more than 6 hours a day have a 40% higher death rate. Hi, my name is Maya Acosta, and I'm a health and wellness educator and host of the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast. Join me and the amazing people that I get to talk to as I set out to learn how to improve our quality of life and increase our longevity. You can listen at the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast or at healthylifestylesolutions.org.
All right. I want to challenge you a little bit on that, Harvey, using the big book, but I think the answer is actually in the statement itself. But I want to do this anyways because the thought came to mind, and I'm sure, I assume that others have this same thought. One of the closing statements in the big book says, "We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny." That word "trudge" to me, I picture a burden on my back. I'm carrying a heavy backpack as I trudge that road. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that jives with what you just shared.
So I have a friend who believes that the big book was written by a bunch of used car salesmen. I don't agree with him. He actually believes that the promises that I read just in the middle of my talk there about all the wonderful things that happen when you live in step 3. He looks at that and he says, that is the used car salesman talking. It's the flim flam man, and it'll come when you get to step 10, 11, and 12, but it's not happening in step 3. So we have agreed to disagree. I remember asking this question. It's so interesting that you brought it up. Trudge the road of happy destiny. I would have been much happier if the sentence had said, skip along the road of happy destiny, dance along the way to happy destiny, stroll along the way to happy. I can think of lots of better words than trudge the road, right? But I think that, it certainly wasn't that same used car salesman who wrote this line, right? Because I think it was this person, whoever helped write that line, probably Bill W., maybe some of his friends. I think it represents the honest understanding that, this is a simple program, but it's not always easy. And sometimes it involves trudge, it doesn't have to, it doesn't always. I don't always feel that trudge, but to try to admit that I never feel trudge, that would be lying. Sometimes I trudge. Sometimes I wake up and, you know what, I'm not in the mood, the sacrifice the morning and the afternoon sounds like, hey, I need a vacation. Maybe I need a break here, but so trudging, I think, speaks to that place. I don't think it's everybody's experience every day, but I think that's why it exists in that sentence. And I passed.
Thank you. And as I was reading that and asking that question, the first part of that phrase, and we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, I don't have to trudge alone. And when I'm with others, and I've experienced this on backpacking trips and stuff, if I was walking by myself with a 40-pound pack on my back, that is a trudge. If I'm with a group of others and we're skipping along with each of us with our 40-pound packs on our back, it's not a trudge. It's a happy, hard, but happy experience. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Got another question here. This comes from an anonymous attendee, and I think we can tie step 3 into this pretty well. The question is there a difference between sex addiction and abuse of others? How can we make sure our fellows are safe?
Okay. So I don't know if sex addiction always involves others. I know lots of people who are sex addicts whose activities all center around pornography, self-sex. There's the only, well, I should say it's a bit can be abusive to our partners if we're married. That's for sure. So the abuse of others, I think that for me, when I hear that, it reminds me of where I came to understand a concept that we know about and we learn about in the problem, that we are handicapped, that we are love cripples. And part of addiction is the inability to empathize. It's the inability to love others. And I think it's rooted, certainly for me it was, in a lack of self-love, in a lack of self-worth, and a lack of self-compassion, which as we were saying in that second of the two benanas, right? Love thy neighbor as thyself. Why does it just say love my neighbor? Why does it say love my neighbor as myself, as thyself? It's because I think the capacity to love others is foundationally attached to loving oneself. So the fact that in sex addiction or any addiction, I believe there's a fundamental failure for us to find the connection that we need to have to ourselves. As Johanna Hari says, it's a misconnection. It starts with us and God, and then others. And we're disconnected from ourselves. We don't love ourselves. We often, again, I'll speak for myself. I know that I was petrified. I was scared to feel emotions. Emotions were the place I did not want to go. And definitely negative emotions, anger, sadness, fear. Oh, I hated those emotions. So I would do anything to stuff them. I would just ignore them, push them down into, stuff them in my pants. And wow, no wonder, they popped up quite soon, in my lust. And, but it was all about not loving myself enough, I believe, to allow myself to process, to feel emotions, to process those emotions. So I think that sex addiction and all addictions, perhaps because sex addiction is a behavioral addiction and it's rooted in what should be a healthy and spiritually wonderful place of union with another. The process addictions all are, I believe, are much more difficult to work through than substance addictions, because I don't need alcohol. I don't need drugs. I do need, I believe, we do need, physical intimacy as part of intimacy. There's a bigger set of intimacies, including emotional and intellectual and spiritual intimacy that we should be working at. But physical intimacy is certainly part of that. Food, we have to eat, but we overeat. We've taken food to a crazy place if we're food addicts. If we're gamblers, we've taken what should be a healthy understanding that we have to sometimes put ourselves out and take a dare and take a challenge and maybe take a chance, and we take that to this lustful, crazy place of needing that rush, the dopamine rush of gambling, and we become gamblers, workaholics. We come from a good place. We've believed that there is a spiritually good place in producing good things, in excelling in what we do. We just take it to this crazy place. We become workaholics. So those process addictions are certainly more difficult. And abusing others is something that is something that's really, really easy for us to do when we don't really appreciate our own feelings and we don't love ourselves enough. And I think there's an addiction that I would call narcissism, which is I'm just starting to look at. I think we all seem to have a little bit of narcissistic stuff. The selfishness and the self-centeredness is really narcissistic behavior. But I don't think all of us are narcissists. But if we are, I think that's an addiction, and that's again, abusing others for sure. And I pass.
Thanks, Harvey. We have one more question that came in from our live audience. This is from Colin. Colin says, Harvey, thanks so much for your share. I think back to the first time I took the third step, and that was a moment I really felt the third step promises come true in my life. Since then, I've had moments that I say the third step prayer and try to work the third step, but haven't felt the same power flow in. What do you think makes the difference that makes those promises come true?
Thank you, Colin. Good question. So I think that a lot of how we see the question and how we feel in any moment in our lives has a lot to do with what's going on in our lives. We all experience stress. We all experience monumental moments, foundational moments in our lives where we think we have to make important decisions, in dating or in job decisions and stuff like that. Should I leave my job? Should I go out there and start my own business? And all kinds of stuff like that. And in those moments, I think those can be those, God's challenging us. He is that manager in the corner, in that while we are in our, in the ring, fighting, boxing, whatever it is that you imagine yourself doing, and there are managers in the back there, and he's, yelling out ideas on how to fight, and then he takes us away after the fight's over, and he challenges us to run around the building, or to hit the punching bag more, or whatever it is that we do that we have to practice. I think God, challenges us through our lives every day in some way. Sometimes we get a daily reprieve. I've had easier days, and some days, there's real heavier challenges. And I think that if we understand that every day is an opportunity, and God is giving us those opportunities and challenging us, throwing hurdles in front of us, to allow us the opportunity to jump those hurdles, to meet those challenges, and become the better versions of Colin, of Harvey, of Justin, of all the people that we know here, than we could be. I think that's how I understand why some days seem to have been more challenging than others, and when we do the third step, I think God gives us a little bit of grace, maybe a lot of grace. And we feel, I am ready, and it feels okay. I can handle this. I can do this, and then, a little while later, I've got, all kinds of difficult decisions I need to make, or trouble at home, and, children issues and wife issues, husband issues, whatever they may be, staffing issues. Those are going to be challenges, and they are. I don't believe that God put us on this earth that we were supposed to live in a utopia. I don't think we live in utopia. In fact, I know I don't. I think we were meant to be here to become the best versions of ourselves. I'm going to pass.
Thank you so much, Harvey. We're going to close up with, actually, I'm going to ask you one more quick question. Any other words of wisdom before I close up?
Yeah. So I do have one actually. I just shared this with one of my men, one of the people in my circle, and I think this is probably a good message. If I have taken back my self-will, if I have made someone else my higher power, what have I in fact done? I've actually ripped God off his throne and thrown him off, and put my wife in that spot, or my girlfriend in that spot, or my boss in that spot, or me in that spot, or my religion in that spot. Whatever it is I did, I have replaced my Father in heaven, that I call him my Father in heaven, or my God of my understanding. I've replaced him with someone else. And, when I see that I'm in trouble, I'm into fear, and I feel that restlessness and irritability, and I know I'm in trouble, and I got to get plugged back in again. And I'm like that laptop, the lights went down, it's dimming. I'm about to lose power. The battery is going low. And I can't just pray for God to help me through things, because God isn't on his throne. So I'm actually praying to a God that isn't in the place yet. He's not in that spot, right? He's somewhere over here off the side. He's out of his position of being in that place. So I think we need a prayer before the prayer, as I just mentioned to somebody the other day. I think I need to pray, God, help me to get you back in your spot. God, help me put you back in your throne. God, help me understand it. This is where you belong. I want to plug in. And then I can get on my knees and be vulnerable and talk to him and ask him and tell him what's going on, and tell him why I'm so upset and disturbed, and why I'm angry at him, if I'm angry at him, or whatever it is I am. I could talk to him, but I think I need the prayer before the prayer. So I think that would be something I might want to suggest that might help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harvey. That was a great RECO12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have other questions, please consider going to RECO12.com/forum and join in our community there and ask questions that may come up and answer other questions that may come up. I invite the audience to come back next week. Next week, we move on to step 4 in this 12-week series, and our speaker is going to be Cameron F. from Toronto, who has been mentioned earlier in this meeting, and also I think last week also he was mentioned. He is also one of my favorite people, and somebody who really woke me up to several points in recovery the first time I spoke with him, and kind of a smack upside the head type thing. Good stuff, and I look forward to it. It should be a great meeting, and I look forward to seeing you all back here then. Now, let's launch off into the rest of our day with the third step prayer that Harvey will be the voice for.
All right. I think we'll take a second, and then let's do this in the plural. All right, let's take that moment now. Prayer. God, we offer ourselves to thee, to build with us and to do with us as thou wilt. Relieve us of the bondage of self, that we may better do thy will. Take away our difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those we would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May we do thy will always. Amen.
Amen. Keep coming back, everybody. It works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching